talking tonight about beginning vegetable gardening. I started gardening about 10 years ago, and it was very accidental. I was in a rental in Ritztown, and it was a duplex, and there was, just your standard yard and stuff. And one day the landlord comes by and he says, "Hey, do you want to garden?" I'm like, "I guess, I don't know." So he plowed up an area, and I had to go and figure out what to put in this garden. I've never had a garden before. My parents had gardens and stuff, but I'd never picked out this stuff. I didn't know what would grow where or how, but I ended up going to all kinds of different greenhouses, picking up plants, seeds, trying all kinds of different things. And what this talk is all the stuff I wished I would have known 10 years ago. Gardening is pretty basic in some concepts. I mean, you plant seeds and you have plants, you get stuff from the plants, you eat it, continue. But a lot of times there are some nuances between different families, different things. So I'm going to kind of go through all that and introduce myself here. My name's Don Abbott, and I have a blog called The Snarky Gardener that I started about 3 years ago. And the reason I started it was I wanted to put out there in the world something that people could find information on. Because I was looking online for specific things, and there didn't seem to be the things I was looking for wasn't there. So I decided I would write about stuff and kind of put it in. And like I said, it's been a little bit over 3 years now. It's been interesting writing. I've done all kinds of different kind of stuff. This is actually the actual site, and like I said, it was something that it's been kind of a labor of love, and I would recommend that after this talk, you guys go ahead and get online and take a look at it. And I mean, they have a lot of articles that go all the way back, and I'll talk about some of the stuff I'm talking about tonight, plus some other stuff I won't even get a chance to cover because there's a lot. Another thing that happened this last year is I actually started blogging for Mother Earth News. They have a program where people who are individuals can just blog. Doesn't pay anything, but they do have links back to my site, which means more people can find me, which is cool. And the other thing about my blog I do want to say is that it's specific. I try to make it pretty specific for Northeast Ohio. Gardening tends to be a very localized sort of a thing where some things can grow here that can't grow other places, the other way around. Like, for instance, I wouldn't recommend trying to grow, oranges, let's say, bananas, tropical fruit, other things like that. But there are some things you can't kind of grow. Like I found out last year, there are peanuts. There's actually northern varieties of peanuts, though my growing them didn't work out so well. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit. But like I said, I've been writing for them, which has been kind of nice. About 3 years ago also, about 2 years ago now, I'm thinking about it, I decided to start a chapter of Food Not Lawns. Food Not Lawns is this book here, written by Heather Flores in 2006, and the whole book's about turning your yard into a garden, and also the community part of it. So we've been working with the library with some things. We have seed swaps in the spring. We had ours back in, I think, March, I want to say, last month. It's basically where people get together, and if you have seeds that you've saved or extra seeds, you trade them with people or whatnot. We also do these kind of talks, and we have different meetings, different things. We also have a website. But I like this quote from the book. It talks about it. It says the average lawn could have several hundred pounds of food. It's kind of a really neat idea to go out in the backyard and be able to pick stuff that you grew, and what's been done to it. There's been no pesticides, no herbicides, none of the junk that gets put on our food. You got fresh stuff that's really good. It was interesting. I had some extra potatoes that I had grown, and I brought them into work. And there was a guy who took them home, and he's kind of young, but he said his mom made him some potatoes, like a potato dish, and after they ate them, she told him that she hadn't had potatoes that good in 30 years. And it was in Europe the last time she'd had anything that good. It's just something I grew in my backyard. But the potatoes and the tomatoes and the other things that you can grow are so much tastier, so much better. So, like I said, we're going to talk about actually how to put that into play. The other thing I've done with the Kent Free Library here, and also I've also worked with the Akron Library. Last year, Kent Free Library started their own seed library. And it's, if you go downstairs, kind of to the left of the info desk down there, there's an old card catalog, and it has all kinds of seeds in it. And the idea is you're supposed to check them out, and you sign out, and you guys can do this after we're done here tonight. I'd recommend it, actually. They have all kinds of different seeds. We actually helped pack them up. We took them, they'd get donations of seeds and stuff in big packages. We take it and make little packages. And so that's what the seed packing parties is about. And it was kind of fun. It's one of the things that at Food Not Lawns we like to do. So I'm going to first start out with going through some gardening definitions. Just things, just because we'll be talking about them, I want everybody to be on the same plate, same level. The first thing is gardening plants come in 3 different levels, I guess you'd call them. You have your annuals. Annuals are something that you plant this year, the winter comes, it dies, you plant it again next year. There are some things that are technically annuals that will go to flower and they'll seed out. So you'll have little seeds that'll hit the ground and they'll come back next year, but they're technically annuals. So, and most of the plants you'll be working with that we'll be talking about today will be annuals. And had some examples here: tomatoes, lettuce, beans, peas, that kind of thing. Biennials are ones that live for 2 years, though most of the time you'll take them to eat them in the first year. Carrots, turnips, parsley, spinach, things that, and you'll know because it's kind of interesting. The first year you have just a basic plant, very, usually pretty nice, pretty tasty, pretty green. Then they overwinter. We get a cold, we get all the snow, they die off. Then they come back up in the spring about this time, and they send up flowers. And they don't taste as good the second year as you do the first because they put all their energy, the flowers are trying to reproduce. So that's your biennials, and these are a little harder if you're going to save seeds, which is part of the seed library idea, because it takes that extra year, so you have to leave them in the ground or whatnot and wait for that extra year. Perennials are plants that live for a long time, more than 2 years. Some don't live all that long, like I think strawberries maybe 5 to 10 before you have to replace them. But peppermint, chives, asparagus, rhubarb, those are the ones that you can buy one plant, put it in the ground, and next year, the year after that, you don't have to do anything but kind of make sure that you don't get too weedy, and you can eat them. Most of the stuff we'll be talking about are annuals tonight, but I will talk a little bit about perennials because I like them because they're a lot less work once you get started. The plant hardiness zones were something I never really understood until I got into gardening about a couple years. We're in Zone 6A. Basically, the USDA and I think Canada has their own. They put plant hardiness zones, and you'll see it on seed packets when you go to look at them. What it says is that you can grow certain things in Florida that you can't grow here. Florida, I think, has the zones are like 10, 11, and 12 because it's a number of months which you have no frost. So, we just came out of our winter, so it's April now. Our next frost will be sometime in October, so that's about 6 months. And that means things, and also part of the thing with plants that I did not understand until I got into it, was that some plants are very sensitive to cold weather. If we get a frost or a freeze, they'll die. It happened last year with tomatoes. There was a frost late. People planted, frost came, killed them. People had to go buy more tomato plants, put them in the ground again. But there are other plants, and we'll talk a little bit more about that don't have that problem. So the frosts are very important when that comes in. So the hardiness zone, though, is very important about when you plant things and what kind of things you can plant. So that's why that's important. People will talk, if you read online or you talk to gardeners and stuff, we'll talk about the last frost date. Now, this is kind of the problem with this is that there's no hard and set stone. Nature does what it does. So it's very possible that, like I said, people planted stuff people usually standardly put a lot of things into the ground in May. So a couple weeks from now, there'll be a lot of flurry of activity. You go to Lowe's or whatever, and there'll be all kinds of people who'll be buying stuff, getting ready. And they'll put their stuff in, sometimes it's Memorial Day weekend, sometimes it's a couple weeks before. Because on average, our last frost is here, which is right about now. But the problem is average, meaning 50%. like I said, last year, I think we had a frost closer to Memorial Day. So that means that, like I said, some plants people put out, you can protect plants if you know better, if you're watching for it, if you have the experience, but a lot of people don't. And they don't know, they have no idea that it's going to be cold outside and tomorrow they're going to come out and they'll have a little brown and blackened plants. Sad plants. So this is the first one. Like I said, as an experience, I've gotten really excited some years and wanted to put my plants in early, but I also had backup plants or go back to the store and buy more, whatever. So if you're willing to take those kind of risks, you can do it. Some years you get lucky, some years you don't. And that's the other thing in gardening. Very much, it just depends on how Mother Nature is feeling, because you're outside, you're in the elements. The other date that's very important to gardening is the first frost day, which means the first frost day before the season. Normally here, usually mid-October, this says later. My experience has been late October. You might get one night where it'll get cold and frosty. You'll come out and have to scrape your windows. That usually means some plants are dead. The same one, like I talked about tomatoes, be gone. But by that time, most of them are done doing what they're going to do anyways. So this date will obviously be more important in the fall. It also will determine some things. You can plant some stuff later that can handle this frost in the fall. There's a spring season, a summer season, and a fall season with gardening. Something that I never really understood until it took me a few years to kind of get the idea that we have a lot more we can grow. And it also explains why back in the day, before we had all the, stores and international trade and stuff, why some things you could only get in the spring, like asparagus is only a spring thing. It comes up now. It's one of the first things you get. It just comes out. It looks just like you get it in the store. It comes out, and eventually it turns into a fern kind of thing. But you're getting the stalks. Normally, people would just eat it for a couple weeks, and they wouldn't see asparagus again for another year unless they canned it or something. Now we don't know these things because we can get asparagus any time of the year because it's coming from Mexico or some other zone somewhere else around the world. But there's other things you get in the fall. I mean, we all know about pumpkins being in the fall, because by then they can't actually handle a frost, but by then they're finished. So I mean, there are some standard stuff, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Some things like spring, some things like fall, some you can have both. Some don't like either, like the summer, and usually they don't. There's not a lot that likes everything. So that's one of the things you have to get kind of used to, the seasons and how things roll around. Any questions, by the way?
Hey, we're not paying you to take a drink.
The other thing that I don't think people get, I had these conversations, I get asked a lot of questions a lot of the times. Unfortunately, somebody outed me at work a couple years ago. I tried to keep all this Snarky gardener stuff. I'm a software developer at Kent State, and so I try to keep this stuff a secret. And somebody outed me, and before I know it, everybody knows I'm the Snarky gardener, and now I have a billion questions, which I don't really mind, Tom. One of my coworkers is here. But because of that, I see a lot of questions from people who are starting out. They're asking me things. And one of the problems I know people have is, and I actually gave a course last summer on this, is you really need to worry about how much sun during the day your plants will get. When you're trying to come up with a site, put your garden in, you really have to be watching these sort of things. Most of the fruiting type plants, tomato, again, it's probably the most popular vegetable, so I'm going to keep going back to it. Technically, tomatoes are a fruit because they produce seeds. They have a little, they're much like an apple or whatever. I mean, in terms of that, all their energy goes in there and they're sweet, but they need a lot of sun. They need a lot of energy to be able to produce this stuff. If you don't have enough sun, they won't produce well because they're starving. Plants basically take sun and turn it into energy for us. I mean, it takes the energy and makes food out of it. It's pretty cool. If you have partial sun, between 4 and 6 hours, you can do plants that are root-based, kind of, I was talking turnips earlier, beets, carrots, parsnips, anything that has a root. Actually, potatoes probably fall in that also. And they need between 4 and 6. If you have more than 6, you're usually okay with them. Most plants will take over 6 no matter what. But if you get in a situation where you get a little shady area and you want to grow stuff, you kind of have this thing where you pretty much can't grow anything if you have less than 1.5 hours. So you have partial shade, which is kind of in between, and you can, if you do anything less than probably pretty much 4 hours, you're looking at greens, you're looking at spinach, you're looking at lettuces, things like that, that they still produce. And actually, if they get a lot of things, if they get less sun, they'll just, like carrots will just produce the tops. And then you pull them and you don't like have a carrot. It's just like there's little nothing because it put all its energy to the top. The trick on that is to kind of dig around to see what size your carrot is. So, I mean, the sun is kind of one of those things that's very important. People kind of aren't thinking at the beginning that what stuff needs. So these are the pretty standard. You'll see this on, again, on seed packs when you go to the greenhouse or whatever to buy starts, whatnot. These are the things they'll tell you. Normally, everything is full sun. There are some things that kind of like a little shade, and especially in the summer when it's more hot. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. Okay, so this is really a major portion of all this. I'm making the assumption through this talk that you're going to have a piece of ground and you're going to put stuff in. You could have raised beds, which are basically just up beds that have dirt and they're kind of up and they usually have border around them. But either way, you're still working with the ground. We're going to talk at the end, near the end of the talk, about other possible ways of doing gardening, including indoors and that kind of stuff, which changes the rules quite a bit. But for the most part, I'm talking about, you got ground, you're going to plant stuff in it. The first, like I said, number one thing you need to worry about is where the sun is. And the other problem is this time of year, it's kind of hard to tell. They have meters you can buy and you put them in the ground, and the next day you come back and it'll tell you how many hours it had sun. It's pretty cool. The problem is you've got trees that haven't leafed out yet, just now. You're going to probably have less sun than not. But you don't really know because you have more sun in the summer than you do in the winter. So you have all these different things that during the year that your conditions change. But you're going to want to try to observe your area as much as you can before you plant. The second thing is soil. Unfortunately, here in Northeast Ohio, for the most part, we have a they call it clay soil, meaning it's very, very compact, holds water well, but if we get a rain or something, it'll pond, water will not soak through it. And it's also hard for plants like carrots to get through that kind of soil. Other places have the opposite problem. They have sand. The water will just drain right through. And I know somebody actually who has a farm, I think in Massillon, and he's like, I think it might have been a little riverbed or something. He has the opposite problem. Clay holds water well, so you don't have to, if you have drought or whatever, it's a little easier. He has to water all the time because of the soil. Your best bet with your soil, like if you're starting out in your yard and you're going to, most people will till. They'll take, basically churn up all the clay soil, get everything ready to go. You want to kill the grass out because it's going to, you could, but it wouldn't be a good idea because your plants would be competing with all that grass. There's a couple other techniques besides tilling that you can do that Food Not Lawns actually has in the book. There's one thing called lasagna mulching, which is basically you take, and it's better in the fall than if you do in the spring, but you can still do it in the spring and use it. Instead of bothering with all that tilling and stuff, you can basically get either cardboard or black and white newspaper, not the shiny stuff. And you take off all the labels and everything off the cardboard. You put it down on the ground. And I actually did this the last few years. And the area that you want to put, you just put it all down, and you put something on top of it. Usually, the reason they call it lasagna garden or lasagna mulching is because you put like cardboard, then you put leaves, any materials that are organic, leaves, sticks, bark, mulch, compost, straw, anything in those territories. And you just kind of put different layers of green and brownie. You get it as tall as you can, and then over the winter, nature takes its course and it turns that into soil. And what you want to get is that kind of soil. The clay that you're going to have is going to be kind of hard to work with some plants. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Best way to improve the clay soil is to go put as much organic material as you can. If you go buy it at the store, you can have somebody bring it in. Whatever. It gets kind of expensive if you're not careful by doing that. But the idea is the more material you get, the better that the soil will get because it'll mix with the clay. Clay has a lot of nutrition in it too, a lot of minerals and things. So it's good on that way, but like I said, you're going to want to try to change your soil. And what you really want in the end, the best kind of soil is a black, kind of something you can squeeze, and it has a little bit of moisture retention. It smells really good. It actually, I think there's something very
Earthy?
Yeah, earthy, very back in the day kind of thing. You can tell a good soil when you smell it. Yeah. Kathy?
If I want to start a garden now and I don't want to like to have to till, I can just put cardboard down and then just dirt, plant in that dirt like a raised garden?
No, actually, usually what happens with that, and you want to make sure you get enough layers. It's usually you want to use compost, anything with really good materials. What they say to do is you actually cut holes in the cardboard to plant like a tomato or whatever. Because I mean, I've had situations where sometimes what plants will do is they'll volunteer, it's called. Like you'll have tomato plants and the tomatoes fall on the ground and they're all rotten. You're like, well, I don't want those on the ground. The next year, sometimes you'll have tomatoes come up. It's called a volunteer. I've had them volunteer in my yard before in the grass. So they can grow like that. It's just not recommended. So I guess my point is you can actually dig a hole and put tomatoes and stuff in. And the reason you usually try to get rid of the grass or use mulching, any kind of that material, is so you're not having grass come back up through, because it's a real pain in the butt. And it gets tall, which will shade out your plants and that sort of thing. So yeah, if you do those line mulching, you can plant the same year. It's much better with transplants like tomatoes or peppers or something like that. They're trying to put down carrots or something with seeds.
So if I don't have any mulch or compost, it's better for me to take up that layer of grass and then put dirt in it and till it?
Well, you don't even have to necessarily take up the grass. When you till, it pretty much tears up all that.
Okay.
In the long term, with my garden, I'll talk a little bit at the end about that. I don't do a lot of tilling once I get things kind of settled, because tilling does a certain amount of damage to the long-term parts of the soil. But in the short term, trying to break through and trying to get something started, sometimes you don't have a choice. So it's one of those controversies, I think, in the gardening world, whether to till or not. And even farms have talked about going no-till because of there's benefits of doing it, benefits of not. So, like I said, your idea is trying to get really nice organic soil that can hold water, which is the next thing you have to worry about. Like I was saying with our clay soils, and this happened last year, we had some rain that came up. We had a lot of rain in June, and a lot of people had planted already. And if they were in low areas, the water ponded and they lost their vegetables. A lot of people had a hard time with tomatoes last year. I got lucky. Luckily, my garden's up on like kind of a ridge, and I can tell like 2 or 3 yards over it, there'll be a lake. We'll have ducks for a couple days. But mine, it's on the top of the ridge, so all the water goes down. And since we have the clay soil, I also kind of dug a few little ditches kind of to hold water, but not where the plants are. You're better off kind of mounding up with that kind of situation. So a lot of times you'll see like a little bit of a raised bed, not necessarily built up, but just even a little bit. And so there's some plants that actually kind of like that. So, and we'll talk about that too. But water is very important for that reason. You have to kind of be careful not to put it someplace where it's kind of swampy. If it's the last place that, water, it drains out when you walk through the yard, it's bushy, that's probably not the greatest place to put a garden for that reason. The other thing is I don't do a lot of watering with my garden, but if you're going to water, you will, especially if you have one of those raised beds I was talking about, you need to make sure you're close enough to your water, because you don't want to be. My garden, the reason I don't water very much, it's like 150 feet from my house, from my spigot, and so I got to pull a hose all the way across. And, it's just a big pain in the butt. I have to have my garden where it is because I have trees right next to my house, so I want more than 6 hours, so I have to do that. I have some plants that I have right up next to the house, and those are more the ones that like the shade because they get about 4 hours. The other thing you'll need to worry about is your pot selection is your neighbors. And I mean that in terms of if you have next door neighbors who are spraying their lawn with chemicals and you're down water them, downhill, those chemicals are going to come in your place. If you're next to a field where they spray, a commercial field where they're spraying for, whatever, pesticides, that stuff, you're going to get drift. If you're next to a regular commercial farm and they have corn, and it's GMO corn, which is a big controversy, you'll get some drift. And actually, that corn is one of those things that pollinates wide, miles from itself. So if you can't, it's hard to save seed with it, but also it'll cross-pollinate with your corn. It's the same thing. So you have to look at that sort of stuff when you're doing your garden. Also, neighbors being wild animals. I have fortunate to have woods by my house, but I'm unfortunate too. I've had battles with groundhogs. I've had to put fencing up and that kind of stuff, and they get in. Groundhogs will eat you out of home, I swear. Deer is another problem. If you have deer around, most of us do. I would recommend some kind of fencing possibly, but I've had rabbits get in too. They're not as bad, but still, you need to keep an eye out and kind of look. You can tell where things live. If you see a groundhog, you can tell where he lives. And if it's real close to your garden, you just set him up with an all-he-can-eat buffet. They're real happy. They'll bring the family. All their little critters will come. They'll invite everybody. And so you're going to want to keep an eye for that stuff. And it's kind of, there are some stuff that they won't eat, though. And we'll go through some of that, too, as I talk. But it's just, like I said, you want to keep an eye out on that kind of stuff. So like I said, when I first started out, I kind of knew some plants, but I didn't understand that there are actually some plant families. You can kind of put them in your mind and say, these kind of plants do this sort of thing. These like heat. These can handle a little bit less water. These can handle a frost. There's actually plants that I have. There's a lettuce called, it's not really a lettuce, but it's green, and it's called corn salad or mosh, and it's a European green, and it actually likes the cold so much that if there's not snow on the ground, you can go pick it. I've picked it on Christmas Day before. I've picked it in February, but as soon as the weather warms up now, it starts to go to seed. It loves, and that's the extreme thing, but because it's that family in that way, there are some other plants that will do the same thing. They like the cold, and there's other plants that as soon as it gets even a little chilly, they're like, no, I'm not doing this. So we'll talk through that, and so you understand kind of, and also the way I did it is I put in order from top to bottom what I consider easiest to hardest to grow also, and we're going to talk later in the talk. I have a list of about a dozen plants that I consider the easiest. I actually wrote a blog post on this of easy to grow plants in Ohio specifically, and it's my #1 site that actually posts that actually gets hit like 50, 100 people a day hit it right now because we're close. Every time, and it's funny, as soon as the weather warms up, it gets hit real hard. If it gets cold like this, it goes back down because people, they're like, ooh, it's warm, it's time to plant a garden. I think I'm going to do a garden this year. And they'll go look this information up, and it's just funny because it's just, I can watch it all the time. So I think the site's really, the post, I really put some thought into it because it took me a few years to figure out that some plants were just a lot easier to deal with than others. So my first one I'm going to talk about this family is nightshades. Nightshades are a family, and they're called nightshades because technically the green area on all of them is poisonous. And actually they say that even if you have potatoes are part of this, you ever see a potato with green on it, and when the sun got to it, technically that's poisonous because it's chlorophyll. And so you're supposed to not eat. I don't think it would hurt you, kill you or anything, but it's supposed to make you sick. So nightshades, for the longest time, and these are all actually tomatoes, potatoes, and peppers, all came from North America, or actually the Americas. But when they first went over to Europe, people wouldn't even eat tomatoes because they knew that nightshades were poisonous, and they didn't know tomatoes were edible. They would not eat tomatoes. They were considered weird and like a bad thing. They were just ornamental plants. So I always thought that was interesting just because. And I never knew that potatoes and tomatoes are related. They actually look the same. Potatoes you plant in the ground, you take basically what you eat. Don't take something you buy from the regular store because they spray stuff on them. But if you ever had old potatoes, they start producing those little eyes. Those are actually going to be leaves someday. They're actually going to come up as a stalk and be a leaf. So this time of year, you can actually go and plant potatoes in the ground. And though if they actually produce any, because there's a lot of energy in a potato. That's why they're so delicious and why we eat them so much. But all that energy produces these leaves and stuff. This is actually potatoes here. And if they come up and we get one of those frosts I was talking about, it'll kill them. But because they're potatoes, they'll set up another one. And sometimes I'll actually have to go out and cover my potatoes if they've come up, and I know there's going to be a frost warning or freeze warning. Because it'll turn them black. They'll just die because it's in this family. Everything else, though, pretty much tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, ground cherries are something I just discovered last year. they're a little bit, I don't know if anybody's ever seen a tomatillo. Basically, it's like it looks kind of like a tomato, but smaller, and it has like a shell on the outside.
Like a lantern.
Like a what?
Lantern.
Lantern?
Like a little Chinese lantern.
Yeah. And, well, ground cherries are like that, but they're sweet. And really delicious. And the ones we have, like pineapple, actually have some seeds here. We would like to try them, to grow them. But last year, like I said, was my first year, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. Yeah, go ahead. Sweet potatoes are not related to these. They're actually a different family. I want to say, like, not this family. No, they're not related, and they actually they're a little more cold. They're even less cold tolerant than regular potatoes. I actually haven't grown sweet potatoes. It's one of those things. I have a list, and I've been gardening for 10 years, and I have a list of things I haven't even tried yet because you just have a billion things you can grow. Well, not literally, but there's probably I have a good list of 50 to 100, I think, at least 50 that you can grow. But like I said, sweet potatoes are actually they're probably better for you. Regular potatoes, but yeah, they're not really.
It belongs to the
That's not how.
Convolvulacea.
I thought they were
It's the
related,
tuber
like,
roots.
I want to say they're like morning glories or something like that weird there. I'm not sure. It's a totally different family. Hmm? Yeah, that's the thing. Usually with families, it's kind of weird what's related. It's usually the look of the plant. Like I said, tomato leaves look just like potato leaves. The potatoes and tomatoes look the same almost. And there was I think it was on last year, year before, they actually have, they kind of grafted a potato and a tomato plant together. And you can actually, they're called ketchup. They call it French fries and ketchup or some combo like that. And it's actually, it'll do both, which I don't know why. I think it just do. But it is the same exact family. And one of the things you have to know about these families is one of the recommendations with gardening is they say you don't want to put the same families in the same place year after year after year. You want to do a rotation. That's why, so you don't do tomatoes and then do potatoes the next year. They're the same family. They have the same diseases. They use the same minerals from the ground. So that, and the hard part is I grow a lot of potatoes and tomatoes, so I have trouble sometimes trying to figure out where I'm going to put everything. Sometimes it's like a jigsaw puzzle. But in order of things that are easy to hard, I've not had the best luck. Eggplants are kind of, they tend to get eaten up early if they're not strong plants. Flea beetles, they have little holes in the leaves. But the other ones, I've never had that trouble with tomatoes or potatoes for that matter, or even peppers. So, like I said, tomatoes are really cool. They're probably I think they are the number one thing grown in a garden because the tomatoes that you grow, you pick out of your garden taste like nothing you've ever had at the supermarket. Nothing. Because the ones in the supermarket have been specifically bred for two reasons. One, they transport well, and two, they don't spoil fast. There's no flavor or nutrition mentioned in that conversation. The tomatoes you grow in your backyard aren't built to go very far. They sometimes are squishy, but they're some of the most delicious things. These are my Snarky orange. I actually saved seeds from a hybrid plant about 5 years ago, and I actually have my own variety. Basically, I've grown them out, and these are like the most delicious things in the world. They're very sweet, very nice. They're actually sun gold. If you go to the store, you go to the the plant store here this next month or two, and you go for sun gold or sun sugar. They're basically the same kind. Very good. I recommend them. So these are what ground cherries kind of look like. They actually have entered stuff into the fairs, and that's me in second place. And quite honestly, the fair is just what they look like because they don't taste that way. So let's go through some of the more details of them. Nightshades like the full sun. They're usually planted, except for potatoes. Everything else is planted from mid-May on. The potatoes can go in. Actually, they say, technically, they usually say St. Patrick's Day. But I found that's a little too early for my taste. And you can plant them into May anyways. It's just they can handle the cold because they haven't put up any foliage yet. It takes a little bit before because the ground's cold and they're kind of waking up, and so they don't send leaves up right away. One thing with tomatoes, especially, this is and you'll see this in other families. It's kind of interesting. It's one of those things I never put together until I was into it for a while. Tomatoes come in determinate and indeterminate. It's basically saying determinate means it's going to get so big, when you get about that big, it's going to produce all its tomatoes at once, all its fruit, then it's going to go, I'm not growing any more stuff, I'm done. Usually aromas are very much like that. There's some other ones, and they grow, and the other kind, indeterminate, they'll just keep growing, and I got a picture later on, you'll see. You've got to really, I mean, they can get 8 feet high. It's not very unusual for tomatoes to get like that. They just go all over the place. You got to support them. You got to have fencing or some kind of caging, because if you don't, they'll be on the ground. Tomatoes are weird because they're one of the few vegetables I've ever seen that if the stem hits the ground, it'll create roots. And the first couple of years I grew tomatoes like that, they were like on the ground and kind of, you couldn't even move them. And they get just kind of everywhere. You want them up. They're much better. They like being up. Usually what I do, and you can't see it in this picture, but I have the fencing around the outside. And usually I'll weave as the tomato goes, and I have a good picture of this later. You can weave the plant as it's growing up into the fence so it kind of supports it. And then if it gets too big and it gets past, because the fences I have are about this tall, and you can kind of just weave it on the top. It's kind of cool because they, like I said, they'll just keep going. For the most part, this family is drought resistant. I mean, you might have to water, like we had, it's weird, we had all that water in June, and then we had very dry weather for most of the summer. And I watered. I usually don't water. I water just a little bit. I didn't really water tomatoes and stuff much at all. They don't like frost at all. If you have tomatoes or peppers or any of that stuff, the warmer weather they love, and if it's cold or cool, they're not real happy about that. They're annuals. Technically, they're not annuals, but here they're annuals because as soon as the frost happens, they die. If you were in, I was just saw something on one of the Facebook groups I'm part of. People were talking about you can pot up like you can put, have like a pepper plant in the ground, put it into a pot, take it into the house, get it nursed through the winter. You can put it back out and it'll grow again. They don't die, but because we're in the, we have frost and stuff, they do. So technically, they're not an annual, but we treat them like that. Your best bet for them is to get the starts at the store, or with the potatoes, you get seed potatoes. You buy a whole bag of them. I also have a recommended place later on I'll talk about where I get all my stuff. It's in Ravenna that I just love. I've been going there for years. And they have this sort of thing, the seed potatoes. You don't want to use you can probably use ones at like at the farmer's market or something, but I would not recommend going to a supermarket and getting potatoes just because A, they're not organic. The stuff they put in commercial potatoes to grow them is not good. And also they spray them with stuff so they don't sprout, so you may never get, they may never grow.
Before he goes on to this, I did find out that they're part of the morning glory family, the sweet potatoes.
That's what I thought, because they kind of look a little bit, they're kind of viney. Yeah. And there's me winning at I love this picture. I do my zucchinis.
What an amazing photographer, too.
Yeah. This is Carol, by the way. She's the other half of Not Long Day, my girlfriend. So this is I don't even know how to say this word. Super good enough. It's a squash family. It's everything, and it's funny that like as a kid I never put all this together until I was doing it. All of these are related. All of zucchini, summer squash, which are basically your yellow squash. Cucumbers. I mean, cucumbers look like zucchinis. I mean, they basically look like winter squashes or things like acorn squashes or spaghetti squashes, anything like that. We call them winter squash because you can just grow them and they'll store. You can just leave them on top of the, I don't know, refrigerator is the best place, but you can put them in a cool place and they won't rot or anything for all winter. It's really neat. Pumpkins, watermelon, and like cantaloupe and muskmelons, that kind of stuff. Those are all related for the most part. They all kind of viney. Again, they love this full sun. They're fruit. This is technically fruit because cucumbers and zucchini and stuff have seeds. They're producing seeds. They want you to eat them and propagate them. So, and I mean, if you've ever carved a pumpkin, all those seeds, they're edible, but they're also, if you planted them again, you would at least get something from them. Let's see here. They love this. They love the heat even more so than the nightshade family. And usually I don't start planting them until about June-ish. There are kind of like I was talking about the determinate on the tomatoes, you kind of have that with these too. They're called bush. If you have any varieties that are called bush varieties, a lot of the zucchinis I'll grow are that way. They just, because normally like a pumpkin patch, you'll have vines everywhere because pumpkins just go all over the place. They're indeterminate, but you have some that have been bred specifically to be in a bush, and so it's nice and neat and they grow. But the thing is, I've seen things where they're like, oh, my zucchini didn't go all year long. Well, if they're a bush variety, normally they're not designed to go all summer long. I had 2 years ago when it was kind of cool, I had some that went okay, but normally you're supposed to plant some a little bit, like every couple weeks or once a month or whatever, and you could spread them out over the summer so that you can constantly get a supply. And that's common also in gardening, that you can do that. The bush ones are a little easier to grow too, I think, just because they're faster and they do their stuff in time. These are also very frost intolerant. I wouldn't even think about putting something out there until June probably. And they can be direct seeded or started. Some things have to be put into the ground because they don't move out. But you can buy different starts and stuff. My experience is they usually do a little better if you direct seed. If you just put seeds in the ground, most of these like to be mounded up usually with zucchinis or any of this stuff actually. They like that. So I think they don't like the water per se. Cucumbers are a little weird because they actually like just a little bit of shade. They don't like too hot, but they still like the warm. So like I said, there's a really good family for, and you'll notice that a lot of these have a lot of water to them. I mean, zucchini is almost all water. So yeah, these will need water, I think. These were some of the things I did water last year. This is the onion family, alliums. Again, this is one of those things I just never understood. All these things, it makes sense. They all taste kind of the same but different. Garlic kind of tastes like an onion, kind of tastes like chives. Some are more mild than others, but they're all kind of the same family. They all have the same sort of thing. They all have kind of these little stalks that come up that look kind of like this, or like this is garlic here. Garlic's a little different than the other ones, so I think garlic is also the easiest to grow out of them. Here in Ohio, you'll see here, garlic is actually planted in October. It can be planted in the spring, but it's better. You plant it at about mid-October, mulch it with like leaves or something so it doesn't, because if it freezes, it'll pop the bulbs out, the cloves out. I found that out also. You have to take the bulbs and split them out to little clove pieces. You plant them and they'll come up. And then you gather them around July. And then they come out and they look just like this. And you put them up, you dry them, and you got garlic. It's so much better, again, so much better than the garlic that you get in the store that was grown in China and shipped over, all that sort of stuff.
Your best bet's to buy a bunch of big heads of it at the farmer's market. Take all the good cloves off of it. Keep the little small ones for your cooking. Use the big heads in October that you plant them so that or not heads, but the clove. So then you do have the heads after for next year.
And I also, this is where we start getting to talk about the perennial stuff. Chives, they have some garlic chives which are related. They just taste a little more garlicky. I found, this is actually what they call a walking onion, which I thought was really cool. I just discovered these a few years ago. Walking onions are called this because they're sometimes called Egyptian walking onions. I don't know why. I don't think they're from Egypt. I think just somebody thought that was a cool name. But what happens is they start right now. They're one of the first things to come up in the spring also, which is kind of cool. They're really more for green onions. You know, the top's not so much the white part. But the reason they call them walking onions is they get about, I don't know, maybe this tall. And they get these little bulbets. I forget exactly the name of it. But there's like maybe 6 to 10 little tiny onions on the top, and that's the seed for next year. And they fall over 2 or 3 feet, and that's why they walk. They'll slowly move through your garden. But the perennial, they'll come back every year as long as you don't take the bulbs out and eat them. What's really funny is where we got ours, there was a lady who had them, and somehow they walked 100 feet. I don't know how they did this, because it wasn't like there was onions all the way from here to there, but they were in a different spot. I'm thinking maybe an animal moved them. I don't know. It was weird how they walked. The nice part is, like I said, I like them because you don't ever have to plant them again. They kind of plant themselves, and as long as you keep them so they don't get everywhere. some of the perennial stuff, that's the downside of them. Some things spread, and we'll talk about that. Chives, not so much. Walking onions, obviously. Regular onions aren't too bad. If you go, you can buy them at the store. You get these little bulbs. They're actually like little tiny onions. You put them in. They'll come up as green onions, and you can eat them that way. Or you can go through the whole summer, and in the fall, they'll die. The tops will die off, and you'll get. It matters. I haven't had a lot of luck getting good-sized onions. With onions, there's all kinds of weird things about day length and stuff. But the bulbs are pretty good. I've done leeks the last few years also, but you kind of have to start them. Leeks are about that big around, tall. They're used in like soups and stuff. They're real mild, really nice. I just started doing, but they're a little harder. Like I said, garlic's real straightforward. I would recommend it. They can handle some shade. You plant most of except for the garlic in the spring. They're very frost tolerant. Like I said, they're the first things that come up in the spring on a lot of stuff. So. Yeah, they can handle cold just fine. They're great. They're an animal repellent, which is something else I discovered. Actually, garlic is one of the things deer will not touch. And actually, I've heard stories of people said they've actually, like around a tree or around something they don't want deer to get to, they'll just put garlic all the way around it. They also said that about rabbits, but I'm not sure if it's true or not because last year I had a garlic patch, and my dog and I were taking a walk around the garden, doing checks, and all of a sudden 2 rabbits ran out of the garlic patch. They were hiding under there. I'm like, well, if it's supposed to repel them, what are they doing there? So fortunately, I had fencing so they couldn't get inside. Rabbits are usually only a problem with one family. We'll talk about that. They're not too bad, but they'll hit some other things too. But still, I didn't want rabbits inside the fencing, so that's why I had my vicious 15-pound dog take care of. Sure that they were chased away. With the garlic, you use the cloves. With the walking onion stuff or whatever you bulbs, you can also use the starts, or you can just throw onion seed down. I haven't had a lot of luck with that, but if you had some extra, you just wanted to, it probably would happen. Like I said, these take care of themselves pretty nice, especially the more perennial ones. Now this family is an interesting one. Something else I also did not know. It's brassicas are basically in the cabbage family. The cabbage family has a lot of different things that you can eat, and I think as a kid I kind of figured out that broccoli, cauliflower were kind of the same family. It makes sense they kind of look the same, but turnips and rutabagas are all in this family. Kale is in this family. Mustard. Cabbages, and it's just different parts. Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are basically just little cabbages on a stalk. It's just different ways and forms that people have been able to grow them, and brassicas go way back in time. I mean, they're like one of the first things that were ever domesticated. These are radishes, obviously broccoli, kale. They can handle some shade too, which is kind of nice, especially the greens part. They do not like heat usually, and so but they'll get bitter basically. I mean, they'll still grow, but they'll be much less sweet. Brassicas are one of the few that I know of that they're really good like in the fall when we get our first couple frosts. Brussels sprouts are really good like in November and December. They're that hardy, but they really need to have that cold. So, like I said, Brussels sprouts you're really only supposed to have in the winter. Cabbages are really a winter thing. You can have spring ones too, some of them. But most of these will do really well after some cold. They'll be much sweeter because the plants produce sugar in order to keep them from dying from the cold. So, and I've had really a lot of luck with radishes and turnips, mustard, kale. One of the downsides of the brassica family, though, is, like I said, they are the cabbage worms we have. If you ever looked if you have a garden, ever seen anybody with it, you see these little white butterflies, moths, they're flying around. They have sometimes a dot, sometimes 2 dots. Well, unfortunately, what happens is, I don't remember the order. One of them has 2 dots as the male and 1 dot as the female, or the other way around. And what the male will do is go and find a brassica and will sit and fly around it until the female comes around, or the other way around. Either way, and then they, have moth babies, which is basically little green worms. And they will eat this stuff up like nobody's business. It's one of the reasons I've actually stopped growing broccoli, and I didn't have too bad with the cabbage, but I had an awful time with broccoli. They love that and groundhogs. Oh, everything loves broccoli. But some of the ones, so I mean, in a lot of these, you'll end up with those little green worms. And so just to make sure that you know about that, you can cover them with, there's some kind of this light material that you can kind of see through it. You can buy. There's some ways to get around it, but like I said, I definitely do not recommend spraying some chemicals and stuff to keep away worms and things. It's just, you're gonna end up eating that stuff. So I would, for at least to start out, I would say avoid anything probably maybe to here and below. Turnips and radishes are kind of hot, and so is mustard, and they don't seem to like that as much. I've never had a problem with my turnips or my radishes with the little green worms, but I have with other things. Kale will get them sometimes, and arugula will a little bit, but they all have that little bit of hot to them. Where the other ones have been more bred out. I think they're more domesticated, less wild. So, and these little white butterflies that we have were imported from another country, and yeah, they really take the joy. There's nothing worse than getting broccoli you just grew, and you take it in and you boil it and stuff, and you realize there's worms in it. They're like green little guys. And I've tried picking them off. You go through this whole process where you're picking stuff off, and you just can't keep up with them. They're just everywhere. So that's that family. These are legumes, beans and peas. This is the one family that rabbits love. They also love clover, same family. These are really cool because they're used. The reason why farmers grow corn and then they'll have soybeans is because soybeans help to take nitrogen out of the air and actually take it and put it into the ground. So there's actually like a bacteria that works with the plant and actually takes the nitrogen out and fixes it into the ground so the plants can use it. And it actually, once the plant dies off, there's still a little bit of that effort. So they'll plant that one year, and then the next year it'll help with the soil, make it better. And they're really easy to do too, especially beans. Beans do not like cold at all, so they're planted more in June-ish. But this is green beans. These are peas I had one year. These are called Jacob's cattle beans. This is actually at the end of the year. And this is what they look like. These are actually called dry beans, which is different than a green bean. Green bean is like an immature bean. A dry bean is more like a chili bean or kidney beans. These are really good at chili. And basically the only difference is you wait till the end of the year when the whole plant dies off and you have these things, and you can take the seed. You can either plant these next year, they're seeds, or you can eat them. So you can cook them, that sort of thing. They do best with full sun, though they can handle a little bit less. Peas are one of the first things you can also plant. The three things you can plant in March by, I guess, I don't know, folklore. I don't know how well they do, but they actually don't do too well or too badly. Is potatoes, onions, and peas, because onions can handle cold. Same thing, and peas can too. They actually do really well, and once it gets warm, they don't do as well. But they also have this bush versus pole. You can get bush beans, which only get about this tall, they'll produce beans for a while, especially green beans if you do that sort of stuff, before they finally peter out and say, well, I'm not producing any more beans, I'm done. And peas are the same way, but they also have pole varieties of both that you need to have like poles of this tall. They'll go just like the tomatoes will. Beans are kind of cool, and peas are more like little climbers. They have like little tentacles. Beans, especially pole beans, they actually go around like this. That's what they call it. They'll go around the pole all the way up. And the pole beans and the longer peas also will produce longer. So like I said, the bush beans, they get done. Pole beans they'll go all the way until you have a cold in the fall, in October. Again, these are drought resistant. They're annuals, and I've seen people actually start them or buy starts, and they don't like to be moved. They don't do as well when you plant them. They kind of, and it takes a little bit for them to recover. They're much better just direct seed them if you can. Okay, more families. The carrot family, which is obviously carrots. It also has another name, but I never can pronounce it, so I just call it the carrot family. But again, it's like you wouldn't think necessarily all of these would cilantro, so like carrots. You wouldn't think that normally, but if you look at the top of any of these, celery is the same way, fennel, dill, parsley. If you look at the tops of the way they look, and when they go to flower, they have lots of tiny little flowers. So they're all in the same family. Carrots are the only one, obviously, that have parsnips too. Parsnips are a little hard. Parsnips are like a hardier version of carrots. The one problem with carrots in this area, we were talking about the clay soils earlier. Carrots don't like clay soil at all because they're trying to push down through. And what happens is there's varieties, the standard variety, you get those really long ones in the store, and as they go, what'll happen is in our soil, especially if you have rocks and hard, they'll actually split out, and you'll end up with these. You'll pick it up, and it'll be the weirdest looking carrot you ever saw. It's still edible, but it's just weird. There are some varieties that only get like this big, and they're made more from clay soils. And if I would say my recommendation, if you look up online or go to one of the local greenhouses, the one I recommend later, they'll tell you what they usually only stock the kind that are good for this area, and so that's definitely a recommendation. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this family, like the Brassica family, when you plant the seeds, you'll have little, if everything goes right, you'll have little starts like 3 days, 2 or 3 days. Carrots and parsley and these, 2 weeks, sometimes 3. It takes forever for the seeds to take off. Beans are about a week or so. I mean, most of these, like the Brassicas are the quickest, and I really think carrots are like the slowest things ever. So sometimes they'll tell you to plant carrots with radishes, because carrots like to be planted in the spring, and the radishes will grow, so you know where you planted the carrots, and radishes will produce. You'll actually get a radish in like 2 or 3 weeks, and by the time you're picking all those up, then the carrots are actually growing. So it's that balance. It's kind of cool. I don't think I've ever tried that, because I don't particularly like radishes, but it's not a bad idea just for that reason. But that's one of the warnings. So if you plant carrots or any of these other ones, don't be surprised if they take a while. These also like cool. They are frost tolerant, and they like the cooler weather. They can go through, but like cilantro go to seed very fast, especially cilantro. I've not had a good time brewing cilantro myself, and I've been doing this a while, so it just matters. Usually it's best to direct seed them, or you can get herb starts. You can usually buy dill or parsley or cilantro at the store, at the garden store. They're biennial technically, though I wouldn't recommend this if you're trying to save seeds and stuff. People ask me all the time for like celery and stuff. Celery's very hard to grow. It doesn't like clay soil at all. It likes sand. It likes drainage. It likes all the stuff we don't have. I've tried doing it myself just to see. I would not be recommended. Mints. This is also one of those I didn't realize were all related. Little known fact that was interesting. Mints have a squarish stem. So anything you see like growing, if it has a squarish little stem, it's normally considered a mint. Mints are one of those plants that, well, you see how they're perennial. All of these have basil. Basil can't handle cold, that's why it's not, otherwise it would be perennial also. Mints will handle pretty much everything from full sun all the way to full shade. I have lemon balm and peppermint near my house where there's a lot of shade. They get maybe 1 or 2 good hours a day, and they do great. They're fine. You plant them in the spring, summer. Normally you get them at all of these. You usually get them as starts or cuttings. Animals will not mess with them because they're really stinky and strong. They're really hard. Animals seem to they don't like that kind of really strong smelling kind of stuff. The one downside of the mint family, and peppermint is especially known for this, I have more oregano in my garden than anything else in the world. It's like taken over. I've actually been trying. I don't know what to do with it. But peppermints are very known to be what they call invasive, meaning if you plant them, they will take over areas. I have my peppermint planted so it doesn't escape, because it's the worst. It has like little tendrils, and it'll just try to escape. It'll go all over the place. It's hard to get rid of, which is good because it means it's easy to grow. But the downside is you might want to grow other things. Lemon balm is kind of like peppermint, but it has almost a lemon pledge kind of smell to it. I usually use it as an insect repellent because it has that citronella kind of thing going. Basil is actually, and I didn't know this before, mint. Sage, thyme, rosemary. Rosemary is the only way. If you get rosemary, you plant it out, you need to, either you leave it in a pot, or you dig it back up, put it in a pot, and bring it in the fall, because it will not overwinter here in Ohio. If we get below, I think it's 20 degrees or something, it'll die. And I've lost a couple rosemaries that way. There's supposed to be varieties that can handle it. Your best bet is to bring it inside and put it next to a window in a cool room that has some moisture to it. They actually get their moisture, they get watered from the air. They're a Mediterranean plant. I always thought they'd be more hardy because they're kind of like little Christmas trees. They smell, kind of that smell. But thyme, sage, any of those, I've had no problems just putting them in the ground and they just grow. And they're really nice. These don't escape too easily, which is good. But I can't say that these three, they're all over the place. We're almost done with the families. Spinach family, which I didn't realize. Beets and spinach are related. They kind of look the same. They got that red stem kind of thing. This is called Swiss chard. I don't know if anybody, it's kind of like, it's basically spinach on a celery stick is the way I like to put it. I like Swiss chard over spinach I like the taste of spinach better, but this will go through the summer. Spinach will not go through the summer. It doesn't get hot. Spinach is also one of those that will overwinter really well. It can handle really nice cold. If you put like straw and stuff over it, it'll actually go through and you'll have it early in the spring. Swiss chard won't do any of that, but once you get it started, it'll go all through the summer. It's very drought resistant. It's good cooked. I wouldn't recommend it raw necessarily. Beets are more of a, they don't seem to like the clay soil around here either. A lot of stuff doesn't, but that's root based. So you want to, again, they can handle some shade. Most of these is pretty technically biennial, but sometimes they'll go to seed the same year. And your best, you can start them or you can do them as direct seed. For those, they're probably 50-50 on what's better. Let's see here. These are just kind of the last ones I'll talk about. Strawberries are actually related to apple trees and raspberries and stuff like that. They have the same kind of flower. These are perennial, so you can, you have ones that are produced in June and ones that are produced all summer. I also found out the hard way the chipmunks love these. And that I've actually seen it where my strawberries sitting over here they're like half a strawberry eaten. And it's on a brick away from my garden. So I actually have to fence them off. Birds like them too. So I end up putting netting over them. They'll walk away. Lettuce, corn salads and mache I was talking about earlier. They can handle the real cold. Lettuce likes the cool. Sunflowers and Jerusalem artichokes. These are Jerusalem artichokes. They're related to sunflowers. They're perennials. That's me. I'm 6'3". These aren't even done for the summer. They'll get like 12 foot high. They're related to sunflowers, but they have a little tiny flower instead of the big one. Sunflowers, you eat the seeds. With those, they're actually made of a root. It's kind of like a potato, but they're sweeter. They're actually they're native to the eastern United States, which I never knew either. They're one of those things that if you add to a place, that they'll be hard to get rid of. A lot of the perennial kind of stuff. And I don't think my landlord knows that I have these here, because if I ever move away or whatever, I just left all these. They'll never go away. You can't get rid of them. Corn is the other one. Corn is actually a grass, and it's one of the most domesticated plants you have in your garden. I grow it sometimes I don't. It just kind of matters what kind of mood I'm in. It takes a lot of resources in terms of pulling minerals and stuff out of the ground, and I would not recommend it if you're starting out. If you do plant it, don't plant it all in one row. Plant it in a square, because it cross-pollinates, and it needs to be able to cross-pollinate. That's why if you ever see ears, the tops are not all filled out, you only have kernels halfway, it's because it didn't pollinate all the way. So and usually if you do things in blocks, you're much better off. So I quoted myself here. So when it comes to vegetable gardening, take the easy way out when doing it. So that, there's no reason, yeah, you can grow peanuts, you can grow celery. There's even, I've known people that actually, and I saw this, which I was interested in. Someone actually had a lemon tree in Ohio. It's a citrus. But they had to take it in. They had it in a big bucket. It's a pain in the butt. So there's some things that are very easy to grow, some things that are just not worth it. And I think if you're in your first year of gardening, you're really, I think you'll feel much better about yourself if you're able to grow things and be successful. Even if you grow grow just one thing and you have a lot of it. So that's kind of where I've come up with this list that I've made up of easiest to grow vegetables. Like I said, there's actually a blog post out there that I've had up for a couple years now, and in the blog post it shows most of the ones I'm going to be talking about in the next minute, but it shows when you should plant them and all the stuff kind of I've talked about, but they're a little more precise and a little less, because a lot of this stuff is just kind of how things feel. So this is my list, and these are cross between easiest to grow and things I like to grow. So I mean, I actually think onions or beans are probably easier than tomatoes, but I like tomatoes a lot better. So this is the list I would recommend, and I've added. Actually, I came up with a top 10 list on that last one, but actually I ended up being 11. And then I've added Swiss chard to 12. I think cucumbers would probably be 13. But I did a garden last year. I had a new area that never, was grass before that, and I decided that I was going to start it out, and I wanted to make sure it was actually going to be successful. And I decided to go with the easiest ones I could grow. It's where the rabbits were, so there was garlic there. I did potatoes, I did zucchini. I didn't do beans because I didn't have it fenced in, and I knew I had rabbits, and I didn't want to lose all my green beans to the rabbits, so I didn't do those. But I did turnips. Oh, the other thing with carrots too, rabbits do like carrots, but they like the tops of the carrots. Groundhogs also. So don't be surprised if you have carrots that the green parts will get eaten by animals. And I also found out, weirdly enough, that dill actually has a butterfly that likes it. I think it's the eastern swallowtail. And you'll find this little green worm on your dill. Just leave it. Just grow more dill. Because the butterflies are real beautiful. But I found one day, and I'm just like, and then I looked it up. I'm like, oh, okay, that's okay. But yeah, you'll find little worms and stuff on things. That's the one thing about gardening you probably have to get used to. You're gonna have lots of worms. If you're doing things right, you're gonna have lots of things going on. I saw a snake yesterday, a garter snake, and I'm like, yes. Most people are like, snake. I even heard rustling, and I'm like, oh, look at cute little. Because I know that you got an ecosystem going on. You have other animals in there. You have stuff going on. You have insects coming in, because some of these things need pollinated, some not so much. Like tomatoes, beans, those kind of things don't need pollinated. You don't have to worry about pollinators, but other things will need pollinator, or like the squash, for example. Any of the squashes need to have bees. You'll see bumblebees and stuff in the middle of the hedge, really cool. But I have toads and frogs and mice and all little rabbits were living in there last year. Unfortunately, my terrier found them. She's doing her job. But I mean, and I've really had good luck with turnips over the years. Pretty much you drop them on the ground and you can eat the greens and the turnip itself. It's kind of like a bigger, milder radish that you can replace potatoes with. A lot of dishes, if you use have potatoes, you're trying to get away from the starch, you can go with the turnip. Carrots, just because they're kind of fun to grow. They're a little harder. Like I said, usually I've done those best in like a raised garden or something where I've gotten other types of soil. They will do, if you get the shorter ones, you can get them to go in the clay soil, but not so much. They're cool too because they'll overwinter, and you'll find, I found some in spring, really nice. Kales, peas are here. They're not too bad. I haven't had luck with them so far. I think it's been kind of too dry. Kales, not too hard either. The problem with kale that you don't, like I mentioned, is the green worms will come and get them, especially if you're not using any pesticides or anything, which I don't recommend using that kind of stuff. Spinach and Swiss chard are very related. Like I said, Swiss chard is basically spinach on a stick. So these are probably the easiest ones, and the ones I would recommend. Zucchini, bush zucchini especially. Everyone's heard has everybody heard the whole concept of, like, people when you grow zucchini, you get so many zucchini you can't get rid of all of them? That sounds like a good vegetable to start out with if you like zucchini. Of course, the problem is if you plant too many plants, you have to figure out what to do with them. We found some recipes. You can make pickles out of them. You can make lasagna with them. You could, actually, we made like an apple filling kind of thing with them.
It's kind of like the tofu of vegetables that
yes.
you can add the flavorings of the spices and the herbs. You would be amazed with all of the wonderful things that you can make with them. And anything and everything. It's great.
Yeah.
Make, what is it? Stuff for the hot dogs. What's that? Relish. You know, I mean, you name it, you can make it. And
Yeah, we usually people, like I said, because you get so much zucchini bread, obviously, though that's just an excuse to make bread.
oh, and if you've never bought one of those little spiralizers,
That's the other thing.
oh my God, you got to get one of those. They're amazing.
What that does is that actually takes the zucchini and makes the noodles out of it. Or zoodles, I think they're called. And so you can use them instead of pasta.
And they actually have websites that like every day will send you a recipe that you can make different things with the zucchini or some of the other vegetables with the spiralizer. It's just amazing.
I'm going to talk real quick about potatoes, and then I think we'll move on to the next thing. Potatoes are interesting because they're relatively easy to grow. You stick them in the ground, and they grow up. They'll put their little, like I said, their little green leaves up. And as they get bigger, you just mound up dirt around them, and they'll keep going. And then sometime midsummer, maybe I'd say 60 to 90 days after you plant them, they'll get flowers. That when they get flowers, that means they're producing potatoes underneath, and they're producing all these little tubers. And you can actually technically go underneath, kind of like going underneath a hen for an egg. I think I did that as a kid. I wouldn't recommend it. Exactly, they peck. But you can go in and get what they call new potatoes, which are the fresh ones. But once the plant will start to flower, and you'll actually get these little things that look like little tomatoes. Don't eat those. They're actually seed, but they're not really. I don't think they're edible. And then eventually all that will die off, and you wait another week or two, and you go start digging, and it's like an Easter egg hunt. And I actually left some in the ground over winter, so we were literally out there around Easter time looking for potatoes. And it was kind of neat because like, ooh, look, potatoes. You have the problem with potatoes, like anything under the ground, carrots are like this small. You can't get all the potatoes. So later on in the next following year, they'll come up on their own. They'll volunteer. You're like, oh, I missed that one. Oh, I missed that one. Garlic's the same way. A lot of stuff. It's funny. You just have stuff growing everywhere. Let's see here. So this is my advice area. That's my little river. And turn this thing down. Yeah, I think my advice would be.
It says click time, not something.
Yeah. Did not install. Anyway, that's supposed to
I'll reenact it for you. Ruff, 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 ruff. Okay.
Thank you. I found that my dog is a terrier, and like I said, but I guess my point here is that when you're doing your gardening, don't just, be willing to reach out, like I said, come to my website, send me an email, go on, there's Facebook groups, there's all kinds of help out there. River's really good at helping me with, keeping the rodent population down out of the garden, and also digging tomato holes this way. So she'll basically just point to the ground, and she thinks that there's some type of mice or something, I guess. That's what they do. And she'll just dig holes, but you have to remove her from the garden afterwards, because if you try to plant in them, she'll dig them right back up. And that's not fun with tomato plants, but she's my vicious dog. So here's all my everything all together. If we're starting out, this is your first garden, take it easy. Look at things, observe your areas. Don't do a billion tomatoes at once, just do a few plants, because you'll get plenty of tomatoes, especially cherry tomatoes really grow as well. And go with the things that are easier. Work with nature. Like I said, don't try to grow things that don't grow well. And this one is really important. Mulch is basically anything like I was talking about, we were talking about lasagna gardening, where you cover your ground at any time, especially around plants and stuff. Leaves, straw's good. I know people who shred up newspaper. Just anything in those neighborhoods. And what you want to do is get around your plants, so it helps to keep the plant, keeps water in, and it also kind of keeps from the weeds all coming up. Because if you have bare ground, something's coming up there if you have good soil at all. And the problem with weeds is that weed seeds are built to live a long time, and weeds are opportunistic. If they have an opening, they will take it. And so especially when you're first started out, and you just churned up all that new soil, there's going to be weed seeds that have been down there waiting for this chance. So if you cover, they don't get light, they're not going to grow. So, and then plus the mulch will turn into soil eventually, which is what you want. So every fall, I bought a lawn sweeper to go in the back of my lawnmower. I mow the lawn, all the leaves, get them all chopped up, and then I take this thing and it goes and it spins and it fills up these bags full of these leaves, and then I dump them in the garden. And I kind of do my own lasagna. I call it pizza gardening because all I do is put cardboard down and leaves. And then the next year, when you go underneath that, the soil's beautiful, the grass is all dead, very nice. So, like I said, the more materials, more organic stuff you can get into your garden, the better off you are. I would not recommend using any kind of chemicals at all. No herbicides, no fertilizers, at least none of the chemical kinds. They're not good for your soil biology. They don't do good things. The reason why most gardeners and farmers have to use fertilizers is because they till every year and they don't put new materials in like we're talking about. So they have soil soil's alive. There's things living. The first 6 inches of soil, there's like a whole, just billions of little creatures that live and do stuff. There's fungus, there's bacteria and all this stuff. And when you till, you mix that up and it helps at first because it releases lots of nutrients, but a lot of that stuff escapes, drains out in the water. So that's why you end up having to fertilize every year. That's why farmers do it. That's why our soils are so bad. Why a lot of, that we have trouble with weeds and stuff because the weeds can handle that and the things we're trying to grow like corn and stuff can't as much. I would also recommend not trying to start your own plants the first year or two. Because you can buy seeds like tomatoes and peppers and stuff especially, and you can grow, you can get pots and soil, but you need to have lights, and they're like little tiny babies. So the idea is that unless you're wanting to take care of little tiny babies and worried about them, because there's a whole process where you first get them to a certain size, and then you take them outside for a few hours to get used to the sun and the wind and everything, because they've been inside shelter. Then you got to bring them inside. Then you got to put them back outside the next day, a little longer. It's called hardening off. I call it the hokey pokey. So it takes some time to get used to that kind of stuff. And if you don't do that, if you just put them out, they'll die because the sun's too bright. They're not used to wind. It'll rain too much for them. They're babies, and you have to. So it takes a little while. And if you're just starting out with a garden, get used to things. Your best bet is just go to the store. They have starts there. You just buy them. You put them in the ground, and they should grow just fine. You will have things that don't work out. You will have bugs that'll come along. You will have diseases. You will have things. Look them up. See what it is. Don't freak out. If you plant enough things that do all the variety, you notice that on my list of 12, there's a lot. All the different families are in there. So you have different families. Some like it cold. Some like it warm. We've had some really weird summers the last few years. I think it might be climate change. I don't know. But some years my zucchini do really well. Some years my tomatoes do really well. Sometimes my spinach does really well. It's just different things. So some things will be good, some things won't. But just have fun. This is fun, and don't be overly concerned. And also the other thing I would say is watch the weather. Be aware of, like what I'll do at this time of year is I actually look down. I'll pull up the 10-day forecast and I'll look at all the lows, and I'll see if anything falls under like 40 degrees. And that tells me we're going to have there's a chance we'll have a frost. I'll do the same thing in the fall. And you'll just know in your head, you'll say, okay, on this day, and you start to watch for it, and you'll get weather reports, and they'll put out a frost warning or a freeze warning. Unfortunately, they don't always put those out, and you can still have it drop low enough to kill your plants. So you have to be aware. If you get especially if it looks like it's going to be that, and the skies are clear, all the heat leaves, and sometimes, like I said, different plants react to the cold differently. So watch the weather also because you'll need to know if you need to water something. Yeah, go ahead. Excuse me?
What do you cover with?
Actually, don't use plastic. You can use, I use my leaves that I have or straw, or you can use bed sheets. Anything like that, but the plastic will just stick to them. And the idea is you're trying to hold the heat in from the ground more than anything else. So yeah, with my potatoes, if I have to cover them in the spring, they're just like this high, so I'll just mound up a bunch of leaves over them. If it's like tomatoes or something I put like that, I'll either use, I have materials that I've bought or little covers and stuff that you can use, but yeah, if you have to, bed sheets and stuff. The problem is if you have a whole garden, I've done this before too, it's awful. You're at work all day long, you go, uh-oh, there's a frost warning for tonight. you go home and you're running around trying to cover it. It looks like ghosts have hit your garden because you have sheets everywhere, buckets, and you're trying to cover everything. So that's why I don't recommend putting stuff in too soon. Don't get too excited about the nice weather because we're in Ohio and you know what happens. We could easily have snow again. Who knows? And tomatoes don't like snow. Just saying. So you have to be a little more, I think, more observant of weather. Go ahead. Haven't said so. There's a place. Actually, here it is. There's a place on 14 called the Garden Spot. That place I've been to probably. I started going there. Must have been 7 years now. And I've gone to other ones. I don't recommend. I really don't like what you end up getting at like Lowe's and Home Depot because I think the pricing's a little too high and I don't.
They use a lot of substandard quality materials.
So, yeah. The really cool thing about the Garden Spot is that they have seeds in jars. So you go to Lowe's or something, and they got a pack. It's a couple bucks for a packet of seeds. They have jars of like all kinds of different seeds, and it's like you get a whole. I think you get an ounce of them for like $1. I mean, it's just like amazing amounts of seeds for very little. You can walk out with just like 30 cents worth of seeds for one kind, which you would never buy anywhere else. And they just have, and the varieties they seem to keep are ones that will do well here. The carrots I was talking about, that's the kinds they carry. And they seem to be very knowledgeable also. So